All right, y'all, welcome to another episode of Soul Care Conversations with Jess. I am your host, Jess. I really pray that you have been enjoying the conversations so far. If you are new to this channel, welcome to the Soul Care community. We're so happy to have you here. We talk about all things soul care. We keep it transparent, we keep it vulnerable, we keep it real, we keep it 100. You know what I'm saying? Uh, but if you're new here, don't forget to like, to comment, to subscribe, and to share if the conversation has been valuable to you. So you can tell from today's title that I'm going to be talking about my past struggle with anxiety and depression. I think it's important to have the conversation because so many times we act as though, we just arrived at a certain place, or we act as though we didn't go through a process or a journey. And I'm just not that girl. I'm not that girl. I'm all about being transparent. I'm all about being vulnerable. I'm all about being open because I have found that over the years that my transparency and my vulnerability has been a blessing to so many people. And so that's my heart today, is that as I talk about my experience with anxiety and my experience with depression, is that it will be a blessing to you and that you would be able to somehow see yourself in the conversation, whether it is you will be able to celebrate if this was a past experience of yours, or if it is a current experience, that you would be able to give yourself some grace, to feel validated, and to know what are some next steps that you can take if you've experienced or are experiencing anxiety or depression. So let me start with, which one do I want to start with? Let's start with anxiety. Okay, I'm gonna start with anxiety. So I know that I struggled with anxiety for a very, very long time. But I didn't know that it was anxiety. I had no idea that it was anxiety. So I remember I would have this feeling. So for me, anxiety is a feeling in my chest. And so also being able for myself to differentiate what is anxiety and when I'm feeling nervous. Okay. So when I'm feeling nervous, it's in my tummy. I have this knot in my stomach, but when I'm anxious, it feels like a 300-pound man, maybe a bigger man than that, is sitting in my chest. Sometimes it feels like I can't breathe, any of those things. Do I still experience feelings of anxiety? Yes, I do. But now I know how to mitigate it, and I'll talk more about that. So I would navigate through anxiety and have no idea that it was anxiety. I'm going to tell you how I knew it was anxiety. When I first started dating my husband, we were going to go on our first date. And I was having these feelings in my chest. And these are feelings that I would have had before, but because of the over spiritualization and not having language for what I was experiencing, I chalked it up to, it's the Lord telling me not to go on a date with this guy. Because in the past, when I would have these feelings, I would have thought that it was God speaking to me about not to do something. And so I remember I worked at H&M at the time, and I remember I was there cleaning and doing my thing. I worked, as I said, worked at H&M, so I'm doing my little retail thing or whatever. And I'm like, God, like if you're speaking to me not to go on a date with this guy, let me know. And I specifically heard the Lord say, what you are experiencing is anxiety. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? What you are experiencing is anxiety. And I'm grateful for my relationship with the Lord, that He would speak to me in such a specific way, because I was journeying through this thing and I didn't have language for what I was experiencing. I didn't know it was anxiety. At the time, I hadn't started my master's degree, so I didn't have language, as I said, for what I was experiencing. And so now I was able to have language for the anxiety that I was experiencing. Did the anxiety stop in that moment? Absolutely not. I had a journey, periods, a season, so many of course, as I said, it was happening before, but so many experiences of deep, deep anxiety, restlessness, and aspects of anxiety. How did my anxiety show up? How did the anxiety show up? It showed up in how I expressed myself, right? I would be just very anxious. I wasn't an anxious presence, right? So a lot of the times I would be experiencing anxiety and nobody would know but my husband, and maybe a few of my close friends, because they would see that the pattern of my behavior would change. Anxiety would show up, as I said, in my chest. Anxiety would show up in my body in different ways. So as a headache, anxiety showed up in that way. Anxiety showed up in aspects of me working harder than I needed to because I wanted to be perfect. Yes, anxiety showed up in aspects of perfection. Perfection. That is a huge way that anxiety showed up. And then I burnt out, right? Because I was on this because I was on this rat race of wanting to prove myself and to be perfect, which was not attainable. I would just do and do and do. So that anxiety would show up in my work ethic and how I presented myself. Anxiety would show up in the way that ooh, this is a good one. Anxiety would show up each time I would do something. What I mean by that is, so if I was planning an event, every time I would launch the event, anxiety would present itself. I still struggle with time anxiety. So if I am navigating through something and I'm seeing that time is at the essence, and my husband can speak to this, I would be getting anxious. Okay, we need to hurry up. We need to do this, different things like that. And I would get anxious. Where after I had my daughter, I wouldn't say that I struggled with postpartum anxiety, but I definitely had anxiety. And even if I did, it wasn't to a high level because I had done so much work to work through that anxiety, but I would constantly check if she was breathing. And of course, some of this is normal as a new mom, if any of you are a mom. But I would take it to a new level of just like consistently checking, nitpicking, doing these different types of things until I had to call my therapist and be like, no, I think that there's some onset of postpartum anxiety that's happening. And then I was able to mitigate. So anxiety really showed itself in my behavior. I would definitely say I struggled with, what's this one? Poverty anxiety or money anxiety. Definitely struggled with that. Of not I had this scarcity mindset that I would never be able to make enough. And I know a part of that is because I grew up poor. You know, we didn't have a lot of money and we had to navigate through a lot of things. And so I had a lot of experiences where I just didn't feel as though, you know, we would be able to make the rent or do these things. And my husband is like, Jessica, this is irrational because we make this amount of money and we are okay. And he would have to talk me down through that anxiety. And even for myself, learning how to ground myself. So, anxiety really, really navigated with me through lots of my life experiences. Anxiety navigated with me through a lot of my life experiences. I remember I have this specific story where my husband and I were moving and we were looking for a place, and we looked at a few different places, and one of the places I was like, yeah, we can live here. This is great. This is awesome. You know, it's right by the subway line. For I was living in Toronto at the time, right by the subway line. This is how much rent it is, whatever. And I was making that decision off of out of a space of anxiety because I feared, right, something going wrong. I feared maybe I'll lose my job. I feared my husband losing his job. So then if this happens, then I won't be able to pay my rent. And then this will happen. And then this will happen. And then this will happen. This fear of the future, this fear of what the outcome of the future will be. And then months later, my husband was like, I can't even believe that you wanted to live in this place. And guys, when I look back at it now, I'm like, I wouldn't even sneeze on that place now because of the anxiety that I was experiencing. And so the place that my husband ended up choosing was like this nice, posh apartment. It was nice. The place was nice. And you know what I said? I don't belong here. Like, I don't belong here. And I would have these fears of like people looking at me funny and thinking, who is this girl? Who does she think she is? What makes her think that she should live here or any of those things? I had that fear. I had that fear that people would say that I don't belong, right? And I talked about that in my last video around the fear of the aspect of rejection and feeling like I'm going to be rejected. That's how I felt in this space, all because of anxiety. And if I'm 100% honest, I cannot pinpoint. Usually, I'm able to pinpoint where anxiety was birthed. I have an idea. I think it has to do with I think it started with separation anxiety as a child, because my mom had to do what she had to do, and so we lived with. I lived with my aunts at one point. Like, there's been times that I was separated from her. So I really feel like it started within the context of separation anxiety and then the fear of the future. And as I said before, we grew up poor, and so the fear of us being evicted or different things like that. And so I really feel like that's where the seed was planted. And so it just grew with me as an adult and showed up in different patterns of my life. Really, the aspect of feeling like I belong and feeling like I'm approved, and feeling like I am good enough caused me to have anxiety about the future and caused me to have a certain type of work ethic and caused me to show up in a specific way. And so that has been my journey with anxiety. I would say, as it relates to anxiety now, do I still get anxious? Absolutely, I do. But I'm able to be very self aware around where this anxiety is coming from. And now, what can I do to journey through this anxiety? And I'm going to talk about that in a bit. Um, I want to talk about now depression. Whew, depression. Depression for me felt like a weighted blanket. I've never had a weighted blanket, but I would presume that this is what depression felt like emotionally. It felt like this thing was just weighing on me and I couldn't move. Depression for me showed up in just sleeping a lot, in a lot of crying, just this overwhelming sense of just emotions. Like, I just couldn't contain my emotions. I didn't know how to nap. It felt so overwhelming. It felt like there was this cloak around my neck. That is what depression felt like for me. And for me, depression, there was two things about depression for me. One, I was high functioning. I was a high functioning person with depression. So as I talked about, just like being able to do all of these things, perform, do well, all of these different areas, but I was depressed. Right. I remember one of my first therapy sessions, one of my therapists saying to me, the therapist that I had at the time, and she said to me, I was explaining some things to her, and she said, Jessica, you are laughing about things that you should be crying about. And I was like, oh, okay. Not her snatching me. And that's exactly what it was. I was high functioning. And what would happen also is that it would show up during certain seasons for me. If you're one of my friends that are watching this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Because I would have friends that be like, okay, it's this time. How are you feeling? I would have it show up during specific seasons. Now, the therapist in me links it back to potentially two things. One, seasonal depression, or the second thing, something specific happened in my childhood around that period of time. And now my mind is making that connection back to that memory. And now those feelings of depression are overwhelmingly coming to the surface. So for me, that is how depression showed up. Um, Overwhelming feelings of sadness, not wanting to do anything, just wanting to lay down, feeling as though, as I said, there's this heavy thing on my chest and I couldn't function. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just wanted to cry all of the time. That is how depression showed up for me. And again, thank God for my husband who, was able to support me and was able to say, Jess, you have to get help to navigate through this. And I think another part that where depression showed up for me as well that was really really interesting was, so when I graduated from university, or from graduate school, I had just gotten married, and I think the aspect of marriage and intimacy triggered some things for me, and depression really really showed up heavily. And also, I was living in a basement apartment at the time, and these are some things that can trigger our anxiety. Being in new spaces, being in being in certain relationships, the lack of vitamin D and sunlight. And I remember being when I say depressed, I don't know if anybody can be overly depressed, but yeah, I don't think so. But I remember experiencing significant feelings of overwhelming sadness, and my husband having to say, no, we're going to leave the house and we're going to go and we're going to be outside. At the time, I had just finished my degree, and I still didn't have language and strategy for what I was experiencing. If it was now, it would be a lot different. I would have been outside, walking, moving my body, different things like that. But that's how depression showed up for me. What were some of the roots of those depression and anxiety? Definitely trigger warning. The childhood sexual abuse that I experienced was definitely a part of that. I would say my father not being around was definitely some of the roots of that. Some of the rejection and abandonment that I experienced, the separation anxiety, all of these different components contributed to the anxiety and the depression that I experienced. And maybe this is you. Maybe you can relate to some of this, and I want to first validate your experience and validate where you're at and tell you what you're experiencing is real. These are real emotions that you are experiencing. That feeling in your chest, that headache, that panic attack, that is real. Those feelings and those emotions are real. And I want to validate that. If you are navigating through anxiety or depression, and these are feelings that you are experiencing, those are real things. Those are real things, right? Our body is telling us something. Our body is communicating to us that this is an experience that we are currently having. Now, how do we navigate through that? How do we journey through that, right? I'm going to share with you some tips that I share with my clients, and also things that I've journeyed through as myself, through with myself. I would say, so I'm going to actually, if you haven't watched the 5 pillars of soul care, I want to encourage you to go back and watch that video, because literally those are the things that I share with my clients. Those are the things that are research that science is proving that can help us to heal from these areas of anxiety and depression. These are things that are scriptural. And these are things that I share with my clients and that I've used in my own life as well. So, what are those things, Jessica? One of the big things for me was moving my body. Body care was super, super important because the body keeps score, right? So when we're triggered, when something happens, it is activated in our body, whether it's, as I said before, through a headache, whether it's just that overwhelming feeling, whether it's feelings of tiredness, whether it's a loss of appetite. Those things are symptoms of feelings of depression. So you move your body. That's a good way to release whatever may be stored up in your body. Moving your body care. So there's moving your body is a part of body care. Eating is a part of body care. Getting enough sleep. Getting enough sleep is an important part of body care. A lot of us are running on fumes And that is affecting us mentally and emotionally. So, getting enough rest is an important aspect of body care. What we eat, what we take in, all of these things help us. I know it can sound, what's the word? It can sound fluffy, but really and truly, some of the most simple things is what helps us to navigate through these difficult periods. Mindfulness, the aspect of self regulation, being able to regulate ourselves is really, really important as a part of healing from these feelings or these experiences of anxiety and depression. What does that mean? That looks like journaling. That looks like deep breathing. If you're a believer, that looks like prayer, right? These are aspects of mindfulness. I know for myself, I absolutely love Pilates, right? I used to do yoga and the Lord convicted me to stop doing yoga. Even though I loved it, I cannot lie to you, it did help tremendously, but I got conviction to stop, so I no longer do yoga. But I found that it helped. I'm not telling you to go do yoga, whatever works for you, but I've replaced that with mindful movement. So the aspect of Pilates, so mindfulness and movement coming together, super helpful because you're doing those gentle stretching. So you're stretching your body, but then at the same time you're taking a deep breath in and a deep breath out. So you're mindfully moving your body and being able to do that, right? As I said, mindfulness breathing, you could do box breathing, right? There's this one that I just learned that I really like. Let's do it together now. So you're gonna put your hands out like this, okay? And you're gonna trace your hands, okay? And as you're tracing your hands, you're taking a deep breath. So let's do it together, okay? After two, one, two. How was that for you? I know for myself, even doing that in that moment, it was so it was so relieving and releasing. I felt like I released something. My chest feels lighter already. And so being able to do those type of mindfulness practices really does help because that aspect of mindfulness helps us to self-regulate. The aspect of spiritual care, connecting with God really helps. I know once again, and I'm not saying this now in this religious trauma way. I'm like, go pray, go read your Bible. No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is, a lot of the times, individuals who are navigating through anxiety or depression, they're looking for that sense of belonging. They're looking for peace, right? What does the Bible say? The Bible says in First Peter 5 and 7, it says, cast your cares on me. In one version, it says, cast your anxieties on me because what? I care for you. So when we're able to cast our anxieties on the Lord, cast our fears on the Lord, it does help. When we spend that time to meditate on scripture, we're able to be mindful of scripture and to hide the word in our hearts, it does help with aspects of anxiety and depression. So spiritual care, right? Being deeply planted and rooted in him. Now, is it just one thing? No, it's multifaceted. So, as I talked about before, spiritual care, mindfulness, body care, community. Community, 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 community. Community really helps when we are navigating through aspects of depression and anxiety. I know for myself that I shared this story before. I think it was when I was talking about signs of healthy community. I've shared this story where I remember when I was really struggling with depression and I texted some of my friends. I was like, hey man, and I remember, I actually, no, I'm lying. I voice noted them and they heard me crying. They heard everything that was happening with me. And they texted me, called me. I was just like, Jess, how are you doing? What can I do? How can I support? The aspect of healthy community supports and helps in such a tremendous way when we are journeying through these seasons and these periods of anxiety and depression. It helps in such a powerful way. So what's your community support system looking like? Again, you can go and look at the past. I did 2 episodes as it relates to community, so fruitful connections and signs to look for in healthy community. It helps to have healthy community. It helps when you are able to call a friend and to be like, hey, can we go for a walk together? Hey, can we do this thing together? Can we do this exercise together? Can you keep me accountable? Can you pray for me? When you can ask that person to pray for me and you know without a shadow of a doubt that they're going to pray for you, it helps. It really, really helps. So I've listed some things before. And of course, the most important thing is getting help, getting support, getting therapy, going to therapy. Okay. Dr. Caroline Leaf, she talks about the fact that healing from trauma is one of the hardest things that we can ever do. And so, that's why sometimes working as a therapist, when you're working with clients who are navigating through this, it can take a while. And so, when you're able to go to therapy and you're able to have an empathetic witness, you're able to have somebody to hold space for you so that you can release what you're going through, you can release what's on your chest, that anxiety that's on your chest, and you can get the tips and the tools and the strategies that you need. It really does help, right? So the aspect of soul care, you can go and you can watch those soul care pillars again, but getting therapy, there's nothing wrong with going to therapy. This doesn't mean that you're weak. This doesn't mean that you are not strong. This doesn't mean that you are not resilient. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that you need support. It just means that you need support to journey through this period and this season of life. And do I say that? I say this from 2 places. I say this both as a therapist and both as a client. So somebody who has experienced therapy and who has seen the power of therapy. But remember, this is a holistic approach. So this is the spiritual care. This is the body care. This is the mindfulness. This is the community. This is therapy. This is also self-love and acceptance. It is accepting that this is my season and my journey. Now, am I going to stay here? No, I'm not. But I'm going to do what I need to do so that I can heal from this, so that I can advance from this, so that I can not push through this, but I can grow through this. Is there life after trauma? 100%. There is life after trauma. Post-traumatic growth is your portion. Why? Because Christ came that we would have life and that we would have it more abundantly. He came to restore us, right? And that is the whole purpose of the cross. So is post-traumatic growth, life after trauma, is that something that we can experience? 1000%. But we also have to put in the work and do our part. All right, y'all. I hope this was a blessing to you as I shared my personal experiences. Maybe you're able to relate to a specific experience. Maybe there's something there you're like, whoa, I didn't know that. Let me know in the comments what this was like for you. How did this episode resonate with you? What stuck with you? What's resonating with you? And I pray that you will be able to apply the tips and the tools and the strategies that are necessary so that you can journey. All right, y'all. Love you. Don't forget to comment, to like, to share, to subscribe, because we're all about having those transparent and vulnerable conversations. This is what Soul Care Conversations is all about. All right, y'all. Love ya. Bye.